everyone. My name is Maggie Betkowski, and I'm a part of this winter's Commarts class. And my springboard project was a series of collages made mostly with recycled materials. And I made a series of 7 animals out of these materials. It's called Paper Menagerie. Um, I got my inspiration a lot from the art that I've done in the past. So this piece right here is a giraffe that I drew with pastels my freshman year in drawing one. This piece is something that I did my sophomore year in painting two. Um, it's a trumpet and it's sort of a more hectic piece. And then this one here is one that I did last year in studio art with watercolor, which actually is pretty interesting because I'm not a huge fan of watercolor, and but it's actually one of my favorite pieces that I've done. Um, and then some of the other, I knew I wanted to do a collage since I haven't worked in collage a lot at all for like in any of my art. So I wanted to try something new, and I also wanted to kind of make um, like a statement, an environmental statement about using more sustainable sources, more sustainable materials as well as cheaper materials. Since a lot of art supplies can be really expensive, whereas a lot of the supplies that I use were just household items. So I started doing some research and I found some collages that inspired me, and then these are just two of many collages that I found. And then um, next, I thought about doing some type of like relief work or using random objects, as you can see in the picture on the left, to make a collage that's also sort of an assemblage piece out of like 3D objects. Whereas, like, I didn't end up doing that. I ended up just using paper, but I still did get some of a relief just from the layering. But those were some of the options that I did. And then just given like the amount of time and the materials that I had, I decided just to go with using paper. So then I did some thumbnails and I sketched out some ideas. I didn't end up doing all of these, but I did do 7 out of these 9. Um, and I think most of them stayed pretty true to the thumbnails. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my process. So this was the very first piece that I did. This one was meant to be the panda. So on the in the left picture, you can kind of see how I started cutting out some pieces of green magazine paper, and I was gonna paste them all over, kind of to make like a wooded type scene in the background. But I found it really difficult to cover all of the space because I didn't want any of the plywood substrate to show through. So that was taking a really long time, and it was really difficult for me to glue down all of the pieces individually. So then I decided to make a background that was completely green and then add layering on top to give some texture and some depth. So that's what the picture on the right is. I cut that page out of a magazine, and I at first tried to paste it on using Mod Podge and hoping that it would soak through the paper and then stick onto the substrate. But given the nature of the paper and the kind of like waxy coat on magazine paper, it didn't really do that. It kind of just repelled the glue. So I then had to glue it from the bottom onto the substrate, which it worked out pretty well. It just caused a little bit of like ruffling on the paper, which I was able to smooth out using a credit card or a gift card, something like that. So that's kind of how I based the rest of my process on, is that like the trial and error that I did with the first piece. So you can really see that in my next piece, which was the giraffes. On the left, you can see where I pasted the background. So I started with a plain background, and then I decided that instead of kind of like free-handing the animals, I was gonna sketch them on a piece of paper, glue the pieces of magazine onto the paper in the shapes that I wanted, and then cut that out and glue it onto the background. So that's what you can see in these 3 slides right here. And then um, This is the almost finished product. I haven't added all the details, but that kind of shows the complete process of the background plus the actual animals. And then you can see that I did that here with the flamingo. I started with the background, cut out the animal, and then the sketching aspect of it you can see a lot here. The turtle was actually really hard to do because I had to get the shapes exactly right for the shell. And it was hard to overlap them, and it was hard to kind of figure out the shapes to cut out. But I think it turned out pretty well, and I really like the texture on this and the different variation of browns that I used. I really tried to find different kind of textures of wood in the magazines that I had because that's what like a turtle shell reminded me of, and I really liked the way that it turned out. So after I was done gluing on the animals to the backgrounds, I started layering to add more detail. So with the tiger, you can see here that I layered the grass with various yellows and greens, and there's even some gold pieces in there that I used on some other pieces, which we'll see on the next slide. And then on the flamingo, you can see that I used a lot of layering with different colors to make the shapes of the feathers on top of the actual animal itself. So I think that just adds a little bit more depth and texture to the piece. And I did that with a bunch of them, including the panda, which you see on the bottom. I just added a lot of texture to that. And then for the fish, I used actually like a tin sheet. So one side was silver and the other side was gold. And I got those actually from Pix. It was like super helpful, and I think it adds a really good kind of shine to the fish, and it makes it stand out. And that. I tried to repeat that material in the tiger, which you can't really see as much in this photo, but there are some gold pieces of grass in there to add repetition to the series. So yeah, these are all of the pieces together. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all your support.